All right, good evening, seniors. This is going to be second nightly lesson. We're going to talk about writing tonight. So it's going to be writing lesson one, writing with details. Before we get into the lesson, some housekeeping up front. As we talked about in class, you're going to have an opportunity tomorrow during the first 10 minutes of class to retake the syllabus quiz. If you got a grade you didn't like on it, that's D or below. Some of you missed the back page. So you have an opportunity to make that up tomorrow, first 10 minutes of class. That's it. If you want to study the syllabus, I gave out some copies in class. There's also a copy of it on Google Classroom. So if you need to retake the syllabus quiz, again, try and start the year strong. Study it tonight. Come in tomorrow, ready to go. First 10 minutes of class, syllabus quiz retake. By the end of this week, I need everybody to track down their 11th grade essays, the college essays you drafted last year with Ms. Correa. Find those, submit them. If you have paper copy, that's great. If you just have Google Drive, just share that with me. Any way you can get it to me, make sure I have your 11th grade essays by Friday. All right. So like we talked about, we set up what we're going to do this unit for reading yesterday. And today we're going to talk about what we're going to do for writing. Quick overview of how it's going to go. Tonight we're going to introduce the main concept we're going to be looking at, show, don't tell. We're going to look at 5 brushstrokes. Those are 5 sentence level tools you can use to make your writing better. Parallel structure, that's going to be a way to add rhythm and music to your writing. Paragraph structure is a way to make it, pull it all together. And while we're looking at all these specific writing skills, you're going to be applying them to your college essay. So this whole unit is going to be both focused on skills, and then you can immediately turn around those writing skills that you learn and use them to work on your college essay. Some writing target concepts that you will understand by the end of this unit. We're going to introduce tonight the concept of show, don't tell, which, again, this is the power of details unit. So it is the writing version of what we talked about last night with reading, using specific details instead of general statements to express scene, character, and meaning. We're going to talk all about that tonight. How to use this concept to write powerful personal narratives for a general audience. Quick reminder, what do I mean by personal narrative? Remember that narrative is just a fancy academic word for storytelling. So all that narrative ever means is storytelling, right? Personal narrative is telling stories about yourself for a general audience. By general audience, I mean both it should be an essay that you could submit to a magazine publication, but also a general audience in that you don't know who your college admission reader is going to be. So they are a general audience. How do you take something about yourself and your life and write it in a way that is going to be powerful to a random reader out there in the world? That's kind of the concept show, don't tell will help you with. Writing target skills. We got a lot of skills that you will have by the end of this unit. So I'm going to go through them quickly. Main thing I want to impress is that you are going to be picking up a lot of tools that are going to be very valuable to you as a writer during this unit. You're going to be able to compose more detailed sentences using a variety of grammatical phrases, including a positive, absolute participle, adjectival, and adverbial phrases. Don't worry about that. I call those the 5 brushstrokes. We'll get into that very soon. Identify and understand verbs as writers, and where appropriate, choose action verbs over being verbs. Again, we'll get into that later. Compose sentences and paragraphs. Use parallel structure for rhythmic, expository, and rhetorical effects. Compose paragraphs. Use a variety of sequencing strategies, including coordinate, subordinate, logical levels, and image cluster paragraph structures. Describe important events, character traits, and understandings from your lives by using these concepts and techniques. So while we'll be looking at things that might seem like, and I'm going to banish this word, but I'll say it once, grammar level sentence stuff, all of these techniques and skills and concepts are going to go directly back into your ability to tell the story of events, characters, people, and understandings and meanings from your lives, right? So nothing here will be abstract or kind of a grammatical exercise. You're always going to be turning right around and applying it to the main kind of writing task you have during this first half of the year, which is how do I tell powerful stories about who I am, where I'm coming from, what I'm up to, where I want to go. All right. So show, don't tell. Like I said, this little phrase is the main concept, writing lead concept that you are going to acquire this unit. What does show don't tell mean? Let's start with the kind of complicated but thorough Wikipedia definition. Show don't tell is a writing principle. So remember, like principle, just like classroom principles, rules come from it. There's many writing rules that come from this, but this is the kind of basic undergirding principle that that a lot of writing rules come from, right? A writing principle used in various kinds of narratives, i.e. storytelling, to allow the reader to experience the story through action, words, thoughts, senses, and feelings, rather than through the author's exposition, summarization, and description. It avoids describing the author's analysis, instead describing the scene in such a way that the reader can draw his or her own conclusions. The technique applies equally to narrative nonfiction and all forms of fiction, as well as poetry, lyrics, speeches, movie making, and playwriting. What does that all mean? Let's start with, so as you said, this is used in many different genres. A clear genre where it applies is movie making. So that's an easy way to think about it, right? Movie making is very visual. It's moving images. It's images you're seeing on the screen. And so say you're writing a movie script and you're trying to think about, okay, how do I communicate to the audience that my main character is very sad, having a real bad day, really down? Right? Okay, so what would be the least effective way to do that? Show don't tell would say let's stop. What would be the most effective way to communicate to your audience that your main character is sad? Well, you write in a thing where the main character turns to the camera and says, I'm very sad right now. I'm sad because my girl just broke up with me. Nothing is going right with me, right? Now, that would be the most effective way to communicate that information, but let's think about how we're more used to seeing it in movies and TV. Let's think about, instead of turning to the camera and giving that information directly, let's say the character wakes up and the alarm goes and they press snooze even though they're late for work, right? And they just go straight back to sleep, right? That's one way of showing instead of telling us that they're down, right? Let's say they get up, leave their house and everything is raining, and as they're waiting for the bus, they get splashed with this big puddle of water, right? That's another way of showing instead of telling that the character is really miserable, having a bad time right now, right? And you can kind of keep going on with it, right? You are familiar, and once you kind of look for it, you're going to see it everywhere about the different ways that movie makers, TV show makers, they're always in the mode of trying to show you things instead of telling you things. They very rarely just have the narrator turn to you and say, wow, I'm feeling sad right now, or man, I really don't like this guy, right? They always think of what's a way I can show that rather than tell that. And again, it's because sure, it might be more effective, efficient, if a character just turned to you and said, hey, I'm very sad, this is my deal, right? But that wouldn't be as satisfying to watch, okay? And so show don't tell is that principle of always try and think about interesting ways you could show what's happening in your story rather than just delivering the information straight up. So I'm going to turn to, there's some writers, a lot of writers have lots of quotes about how they use show don't tell, and it kind of helps explain it from a number of different angles. So here's another way to think about show don't tell. It comes from a Russian writer called Anton Chekhov, and he says this: when describing nature, a writer should seize upon small details, arranging them so that the reader will see an image in his mind after he closes his eyes. For instance, you will capture the truth of a moonlit night if you'll write that a gleam like starlight shone from the pieces of a broken bottle, and then the dark, plump shadow of a dog or wolf appeared. So what's he saying by that? He gives an example at the end that kind of shows show don't tell in action, but let's think about this first part. First, he says a writer should seize upon small details. So this unit is called the power of details. And while in our reading half, we're going to look at how details help you understand a text, in the writing half, we're talking about how choosing the right small details is a powerful way to get your reader to imagine the experience in his mind, right? So when it says the reader will see an image in his mind after he closes his eyes, that is the main goal of show don't tell. Anybody can read information like you read on a breakfast box or you read in a history textbook and receive the information, right? But your goal as a storyteller is not just to pass the information on from point A to point B in the shortest way possible. It's to get your reader to actually see, feel like they're experiencing the story that you want to tell. If you've ever been really like caught up in a good fiction or narrative story, you know that moment where even though you're just reading things on the page, you feel like you're there, you're imagining it in your eye. If you ever read a book and then gone to see the movie version of it and you're like, that's not what that guy looks like, that's because you had this powerful image of what that character looked like in the person's eye, right? So writer should seize upon small details so that the reader will see an image in his mind after he closes his eyes. A much more shorter, but a little bit more harder to unpack way of thinking about show don't tell comes from William Carlos Williams. He was a Puerto Rican poet who grew up in New Jersey, and his way of expressing show don't tell was to say, no ideas, but in things. And what he means by that is, so if you're writing a poem, right? And again, you're writing a poem and you want to say, I'm mad at the world, right? I'm mad at the world is not a very good poetic line, right? If he starts off by talking about a thing that shows how angry he is with the world, say like a little kid, smashing ants for no reason on the sidewalk, just smashing every single ant he can see, right? And that's his way of showing, I've always been very angry at the world, right? That's a thing that has an idea in it. The idea is, I've always been very angry, but the thing, the kid smashing ants on the sidewalk, is where that idea actually gets transmitted in poetry, right? Much more effectively than just saying it straight out. So let's think about some analogies, again, trying to help you think about this concept because it is a little bit abstract and it takes a number of different angles to kind of get your head around it. This is another quote from a writer who makes an analogy between what a good storytelling writer, a narrative writer does and an iceberg. And he says this: if a writer of prose is everything, like just everything that's not poetry. If a writer of prose knows enough about what he is writing about, he may omit things, that is, leave things out, that he knows, and the reader, if the writer is writing truly enough, will have a feeling of those things as strongly as though the writer had stated them. The dignity of movement of an iceberg is due to only 1/8 of it being above water. What is he saying? Well, take a look at this picture right here, right? This is what icebergs look like both above the surface of the ocean and below the surface of the ocean. So think about what you see on the page, what you read on the page. And a good writer is that part of the iceberg that you see at the surface, right? So when you see a detail that a writer has put, it's that part that's right above the surface. But a good detail will make the reader imagine a whole world or character or situation or scene that doesn't need to be there on the page, right? So the idea is a good writer is able to put just a little bit on the page, but the details that he chooses are so good that they make the reader imagine a whole kind of world of other things going on underneath the story, right? So while a bad writer might try and just put every single thing down on the page and bore the reader to death, a good writer knows how to choose the right details that make the reader then imagine the whole rest of the story. So the writer doesn't even have to put on the page what the reader ends up getting from the story, right? Second analogy, and this kind of also is an explanation about why as readers do we need to have this kind of visual attachment to the stories that we're hearing. Well, let's think about how we learn to read. Let's think about children's books, right? Children's books start off being more picture than word, right? So when you have a baby book, the baby is not drawn to words. They can't read yet. They're drawn to big images, colors. And so their first association with reading is a big picture, right? With a couple letters, maybe one word, right? And they're forming that connection between pictures and words is a powerful step in learning how to read. When you're a little bit older as a kid, things become more 50-50. You have about 50% illustration, 50% picture, and 50% word. You see you got a good paragraph there. So you're reading a lot of information, but then you have this a big picture that helps you continue to imagine what those words are saying, right? Then when you get a little bit older, and you're reading graphic novels, reading things like Diary for a Wimpy Kid, things are 75% writing, but you still have some images to kind of help you kind of keep that connection with the text, right? Now, what happens when you're grown up and the books you're reading are look like this, right? Just black and white words, black and white lines on the page, no pictures to see, nothing ostensibly to imagine. But that's why show don't tell becomes important, because you as a reader, you're not that different from where you were a little baby. You still need to have powerful images and kind of powerful visual imagination to really get into a story that you're reading about, right? So again, good writers are able, even though the words on the page are just black and white, look like this, are able to write in such a way and choose details in such a way that even while the reader seems to just be looking at a page like this, in their mind, in their mind's eye, they're imagining all kinds of different things. And again, you've had this experience. If you read a book, you've had that experience where you feel like you're in this world, you're doing these things, a movie is playing in your head, but all you're actually looking at are black and white words on the page, right? So that kind of shows why show don't tell is such a powerful principle. When you tap into that, you tap into that connection between images, visual experiences, imagination, that is powerful kind of at the root of reading. So to kind of talk about, we're going to go into like a little vocab lesson to just talk about this word illustrate. What does it mean when you're asked to illustrate something as a writer? What I want to do when I kind of go into like a word in depth like this, it's not necessarily that I don't think you know the word illustrate. You probably mostly have heard it before. So I'm not just trying to like teach you a new vocab word so that you don't know before. You probably know illustrate, but I want to kind of think about what does it actually mean to illustrate something as a writer. So let's look at illustrate. Let's look at some definitions for illustrate. First of all, where does illustrate come from? It comes from the Latin il, which means upon, lustrate, which means light. So put it together, the original Latin word means to put light upon, to shed light on something, to shine light on something. First definition, what we talked about with children's books, to provide a book with pictures. Second definition, to explain or make something clear by using examples, charts, pictures. So when you're illustrating in something like history, science, you illustrate a lab report with graphs. You illustrate history things with pictures or maps or diagrams. All right. But then the third, and what we're kind of thinking about right now, is as a writer, you illustrate by giving things that are examples of other things, right? Some synonyms. For that first one, to kind of just give a picture for something, decorate, adorn, ornament, accompany, embellish. So you can think about illustrating as a writer as a way to add color, detail, interest, extras onto like your writing. To think about explaining the synonyms for illustrate: explain, explicate, elucidate, clarify, make plain, demonstrate, show, emphasize. Again, that word show. Illustrate is another powerful synonym for illustrate, would be to just show people. Show, don't tell. To serve an example of, exemplify, typify, epitomize, show, demonstrate, display, represent, encapsulate. So when you're illustrating something, it's not just kind of just putting all the details that you can on the page, all the visual, sensory details you can. It's about thinking about what details can I show the reader that are going to best exemplify, epitomize, demonstrate, represent, encapsulate the idea that I want them to come away with the story with, right? When you're academic examples of when you are specifically need to have illustrate with your writing in school, narrative writing like we're doing right now. When you're asked to tell a story, you always want to be illustrating your story using show don't tell. When things ask for concrete details, sensory details, or imagery, those are all almost exact same meaning terms for the details that have strong show don't tell principle at work with them. Examples, presentations, graphs, charts, pictures. Those are different ways that you illustrate things in school. And finally, the picture symbol that I want you to kind of closely associate with the word illustrate is both the literal and the metaphorical way I want you to think about it. When you actually illustrate like a children's book or illustrate like a graphic novel, right? You're giving a picture that goes along with the words, right? What I want you to think about is when you're illustrating as a writer, you are creating with the words a picture that is strong enough to have the same effect in your reader's mind, right? So think about when you're going through your writing, when you're revising your writing and trying to put the show don't tell principle to work. Imagine yourself as coloring in coloring in or illustrating with words what you want your reader to kind of see, think, experience, feel in the story you're trying to tell them. Okay, so I want to go to, we're going to switch from that vocab lesson. What I want to do is show you what I'd like you to do for homework tonight. Homework tonight, you're going to look at a personal narrative by a writer called Junot Diaz. Junot Diaz is probably the #1 Dominican-American writer. He won the Nobel Prize for writing, which is the highest award you can get, the Pulitzer Prize for writing, highest award you can get as a writer, first Dominican-American to do so. And so what you're going to read tonight is just a very short, so no excuses, I want you to read the whole thing, very short personal narrative that he wrote called Watching Spider-Man in Santo Domingo. And so what I want to do is to demonstrate what I'd like you to work on tonight with this personal essay. I want you to read this personal essay as a writer and try and see, where do you see Diaz as a writer putting that show don't tell principle into action. So I'm going to demonstrate this by reading this first paragraph. What I'm going to do is, when I see a detail that shows me something about Diaz's childhood in Santo Domingo, I'm going to put it down, copy it down, that word or phrase right here in this box, right? And that's what I'd like you to do. When I copy down one of those details, I'm just going to think about, what is my inference about that detail? All right. And remember, quick refresher, what does inference mean? It's exactly what we did today with the what's going on in this picture, New York Times photo exercise, right? You looked at what you explicitly saw in the picture and you made an inference about what wasn't there, right? About what was actually happening, okay? So same thing, when I ask you to infer, I don't want you to tell me anything that Diaz tells you explicitly in the text, right? So he will tell you some explicit things. We moved to New Jersey, right? That's not what I mean by tell. I want you to write down the detail and then tell me what inference you made based on that detail, okay? So inference is reading between the lines, looking at what is there on the page, and based on what you see, imagining what you think is not there, what is behind that detail, all right? So let's put it into action. I'm going to read this first paragraph, and then I'm going to kind of go through and pick out what details I found were examples of show don't tell. All right. Diaz starts off. I came late to television. I was 5 when my neighbor in Santo Domingo brought the first set on our street, the first I'd ever laid eyes on. I can still see it in my mind's eye, a small color TV with long insectoid antenna, an alien device to a kid who had spent most of his childhood with no running water, who considered watching goats climb onto cars and houses serious entertainment. All right, so what details do I feel like show the show don't tell principle at work? Let's start off with his description of the first TV he sees, right? Show a small colored TV with long insectoid antenna, right? Now, first of all, you might think, okay, again, to kind of, so that doesn't tell you this is the first TV he's seeing. He's already told you that. So what other information does it give? Well, it helps you locate what the time and place is. If he's seeing a small colored TV with long insectoid antenna, that's a kind of TV that kind of shows that he's growing up sometime in either the 70s, maybe 80s. All right, but like there's not many 90s TVs with antennas, so that's what I'm going to infer from that detail. All right, and you can also show, even though he told you explicitly this is the first TV I've laid eyes on, he undergirds that with details about how the TV looks like a bug to him and its long insectoid antenna. He's never seen a TV before, so when he first sees it, it looks like some alien device, like some weird out of this world thing, right? So he's trying to get you to reimagine as a reader what that TV looked like to him. You know what a TV looks like. You're going to say it's a TV. He's trying to bring you back to where he was when he was a kid, when he first saw the TV, by describing it as looking like a huge, like weird alien bug thing. He's trying to make you see the TV as he first saw it when he was a kid. So that's the power of show don't tell at work. He's not just telling you it looked really weird to me. He's showing you how weird it looked in a way that you can imagine exactly how he was seeing it when he was a little kid. All right, what's another detail that says show don't tell just in this first? Okay, so he talks about his childhood with no running water. All right, no running water. That means like no bathroom, no plumbing, no water coming in, no water going out. All right, so so no running water. What that tells me is that he grew up in I'll say significant poverty, right? Not just poor, but like poverty, right? Having things that we would consider essential. Maybe like your landlord doesn't fix that for a while, and that's a problem. But we would consider not having any running water during your entire childhood. That would be like significant poverty, right? Okay, and then what's another detail? Final detail I'm going to find. I'll go with this last one right here when he talks about watching goats climb onto cars and houses as serious entertainment. All right. So that's a funny detail. He's like, that's what when before TV, that's like what I did with my time, right? What does it tell me? Tells me a couple things. Like if I'm trying to imagine, I've never been to Santo Domingo. If I'm trying to imagine what it's like, right? That gives me a powerful detail that shows me a lot about the setting. And what it shows me about the setting is he grew up in a kind of rural, urban, borderline, right, or hybrid setting, right? So what I mean by that is rural means like country. You think, okay, you're looking at goats, right? Most of us would think, okay, we're somewhere in like upstate New York, we're way outside of the city, right? But he's talking about watching goats climb onto cars and houses. So that tells me that where he grew up was a kind of a combination between an urban setting where you have lots of people, cars, houses, and a rural setting where there's like goats running around everywhere, right? So that detail helps me, just that one detail helps me imagine what Santo Domingo would be like to grow up in, right? What the actual setting is like, how it might be different from my setting, things like that. All right. So again, this is what I want you to do tonight. Copy down words, phrases, details that stand out to you, that show you something, and then think about how would you articulate what specific inference you're making based on that detail. The one way you can do this wrong is by showing something that is just him explicitly telling you stuff. So I'll give you an example, right? Like we go back down through, he says right here, like third paragraph, I had a father in New York City who I do not remember, right? So you wouldn't want to say that's showing me something, right? You wouldn't want to quote that, I had a father in New York City whom I did not remember, and then tell me that what it tells you is that he had a father in New York City, or he grew up without a father, or, he's telling you that explicitly. So do not choose the details that are Diaz just telling you direct information, all right? Choose the details where Diaz is illustrating something that you can then infer something about his childhood from, right? So do not put down things that he's explicitly stating. Put down details that illustrate, make you imagine something, make you see something, make you feel something, and then tell us what that kind of bottom of the iceberg information is that little detail kind of tells you about. All right, try it out. We'll look at it tomorrow. In closing, I got these homework instructions, what I want you to do. I'm going to put those up here for you to look at. It's due tomorrow. This assignment's due tomorrow, 9:13. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes or so. Class hotline, reminder, we're trying to get this up and going. If you've been randomly selected tonight, what you need to do after you finish this homework is call in 1-413-308-2876. And what I want you to do is let us know, leave a voice message where you let us know what kinds of things you saw as show don't tell details in the story. So tonight, you need to call in if you are Jerry, Jalen, Angel, Elijah, Stephen, and Haziel. So if those are your names, you're up. You need to call into that class hotline, leave a voice message after you've done your homework where you kind of tell us what you got. Then we can start next class with your insights to kind of start off our discussion. All right, that's it for now. I'm going to leave a little music. I'm going to leave these homework instructions up. I'm going to leave a little music. I'm going to play it for 10 minutes because that's pretty much how long this homework should take. All right, I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow.